Hey, what's going on? Welcome back to the Voice of the Nets. I'm Chris Carino as we continue to pour through some of the Nets players who played a big role in last year's team and expect to play a role this year. And today we are going to attack Jalen Wilson, not literally, but attack him figuratively in terms of breaking down his game. Joined by Lucas Kaplan of NetsDaily, Tim Capstraw, daily of the Nets broadcast. And guys, and Lucas, you may not know, but Tim Capstraw at one time was the youngest Division I head coach in America.
Oh, I've read his Wikipedia page.
Yes.
I've read his Wikipedia page.
I wrote it.
One of the great things that Cap
Someone had to.
One time, you may. So there's a great basketball coach, Pete Carroll, the late great Pete Carroll, known as one of the all-time great coaches in NCAA history, famous of Princeton University. One of the all-time winningest coaches in NCAA history. And he used to be a consultant for the Sacramento Kings. And one time we were out in Sacramento, old Arco Arena. And I'm walking by, and Capper's sitting on the bench courtside before the game with Pete Carroll, and they're reminiscing about some things, talking some old college days. And Capper goes, "Hey, Koreans, I want you to meet Pete Carroll." "Hey, coach." He goes, "Yeah, between the two of us, over 1,000 victories career-wise." Of course, Pete Carroll had most of those.
Yeah. I had 117.
But Capper had a bunch. Yeah,
117.
Yeah. My point I'm getting here, though, Capper, is I know you as an old coach. There are certain guys that just they may not have the overall sky's the limit kind of potential. But if you're talking about quality of life and you want to be able to get a good sleep in at night so that you're nice and charged up for the end of the day, for the next day, you like having guys like Jalen Wilson. Sure, right? They help you sleep better as a coach, don't they?
They sure. Guys like Jalen Wilson, they are so special for coaches because I know in this age of analytics and a stat for everything, the ability to just give coaches peace of mind and understand that they know how. First of all, how to win. You don't go to Kansas. You're not the Big 12 Player of the Year, and people don't think you can win. A guy gets into the second round, but then gets this opportunity with the Nets right now. And I'm telling you, that's a winning player. That's a winning player in a lot of ways. And probably the biggest, and we saw it again this summer, is his ability to mix in, again, a guy that can attack the basket, be pretty physical, but he's shooting the ball incredibly well. And if that shot can stay consistent, remember he came into the season off of last summer shooting it really well, shot it well for a big portion of the season this year when he got his opportunities, but then tailed off at the end. But, man, he shot it really well again this summer. If he can do that, Chris, there's a place for him on everybody's lineup in the NBA. He's that kind of guy, always in the right place defensively, works really hard, moves the ball well. But, again, the NBA has a lot to do with your ability to mess with the defense and knock down the three-point shot. And if that can be consistent, he becomes a terrific player. I think he's in the process of that because certain guys, it looks like it should go in. And when he shoots the basketball, I think it's going in. The arc is good. That is great. It's repeatable the way he shoots the basketball. I know he came out of college shooting it at a low percentage, and it was a bit of a surprise. I think he's that good of a shooter. I think he's gonna do great.
Yeah, and I think before I don't want people to get the impression that I'm just setting the bar low by saying he's a guy that helps coaches sleep better at night. What I mean is I think he can, when you look down and you go to call his number and get him in the game, you are confident that he's gonna know what he's doing. He's gonna make the right plays. And then I think what he showed this summer, and remember, he came in as a 23-year-old. I mean, he came in basically older than Cam Thomas, I believe, last year, with all the time that he played at Kansas. But then he goes to Summer League, where he's playing with all these young hotshot guys. Some guys that are really high draft picks that you're thinking are teams are going to build around these guys, and then some guys that are just struggling to try and make an NBA roster. But he goes out and wins MVP. And then somehow, we can get into how he ended up second team all summer league and wins the MVP. But Lucas, I think it shows you that there's not just sometimes solid, right? Being the nice guy doesn't necessarily mean that you still don't have the skill to become a really good player in this league, maybe develop into a starter on a good team.
Yeah, well, two things I think of is that he did what he was supposed to. These guys that come in and they're older and thrived in college, as you mentioned, they should be outplaying younger guys that were also just in NCAA or international level. And that's what he did. And that helps you sleep at night. And the other thing you mentioned about, being someone a coach can rely on is I've read, there's a lot of conversation, draft prospects, floor versus ceiling. If you have skills that can get you onto the court, things we maybe typically associate with high floor, low ceiling, but if you are a reliable guy you can throw out there and play, all of a sudden you have time, you have reps to work on all of these parts of your game. So maybe, your floor and your ceiling as a player are more closely correlated than we think. But because Wilson's good at all of the fundamental stuff, he's in the right places, he plays hard, he's going to get those minutes. His flaws, whatever they may be, he's going to have a chance to work on them. And the one thing that, stands out to me about Jalen Wilson, something that was just a lovely coincidence after Summer League, he's shooting exactly 40% from three in his career as a pro. If you add up G League, Summer Leagues, NBA, as we build out the sample size, he's taken about 250 3-pointers. He's made 40% of them. Capper said it, that needs to continue. We're not 100% sure it's going to continue, but if it does, man, that means a lot about his direction in this league and for Brooklyn.
Yeah, if you could rebound, play defense, and shoot 40% from three, you're a $20 million player.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, if you can keep developing that, you're a $20 million player in the NBA.
He's the kind of guy he's the kind of guy that'd be the same player for a potential championship team, right? You want those kind of guys that you can just fill in and you can count on and that can make shots. He's going to have a lot of opportunities in this league,
especially with a young coach like Jordi Fernandez. You want young players with a high ceiling that you can trust. Right. It's going to be hard. You're going to have to deal with some frustration levels at times with guys that are really super high, high ceiling. They're talented, but maybe they do things that will make you scratch your head or lose sleep at night, right? Like we're saying. So with a young coach like Jordi Fernandez, I expect him to lean a lot. I mean, we saw the Jacques Vaughn and then Kevin Ollie last year, not afraid to lean on Jalen Wilson a little bit. I think that goes to another level this season with a young coach like Jordi Fernandez.
Yeah, and he has a year of experience under his belt. I mean, Jalen Wilson's going to get better. I know we think of him, and he was an older prospect, but that first year of experience, once you're in the league, you have an offseason to work on what you need to work on. We should expect and hope that Wilson earns even more minutes now.
Chris, how many players have we seen in the NBA that were older players from established great NBA programs that ended up being good NBA players that were drafted low? You're right. They didn't maybe late first round, maybe not into the second round. Yep, but they've got those 3 or 4 years into high quality programs, and they end up being guys that have 10, 15-year careers. We've seen it year after year.
Yeah.
We are sometimes, everybody drafts potential an awful lot, but it's getting, I think there's some players around the league right now that are proving that if you get guys from those teams, from those certain schools that develop talent that can really help your team. I think Jalen Wilson is a great example of that.
Well, how many times I point out during the course of years sometimes of guys that are late second-round picks or undrafted players who are conference players of the year in really good conferences.
You said that for years, and I'm going to try to go through some of the guys like Pascal Siakam, who I never heard of before he was drafted, was the player of the year for New Mexico. There have
Mountain
been,
West.
Yeah, there have been 10 or 15
Fred
of
Van
those
Vliet.
guys.
Fred Van Vliet was a
He didn't get
a guy
drafted,
that
right?
we didn't know, undrafted, didn't know what he could be. 2-time Missouri Valley Conference Player of the Year. I mean, in the Big 12 is different. Usually those guys don't get overlooked like that. And yes, there's an exception every once in a while. But I think the point being is that if you can navigate through the rigors of the Big 12, the ACC, the SEC, the Big 10, and win Conference Player of the Year, there's a lot of good players in those conferences.
Exactly.
And I think, Jalen Wilson was a guy who had declared for the NBA draft a year prior to coming out, and then didn't go into the draft, decided, saw that he might not get drafted. He took himself out of the draft, went back to Kansas, won Big 12 Player of the Year, still lasts to the second round. And Sean Marks and his staff have done a great job of identifying players. You think about, since the Nets have gone to Brooklyn, they've never had a lottery pick.
It's unbelievable.
The lottery picks have all gone to Boston in the Pierce Garnett deal. And then other reasons that the Nets never have finished in the lottery. Nets have had a lot of maybe not long, deep into the playoff runs, but they've been playoff team. So they've had to do well in the latter part of the first round, in the second round, and they've done that. And I think there's other guys we're going to talk about, like Noah Clowney and Dariq Whitehead, that could add to that. But Jalen Wilson, a second rounder, is that kind of guy. And I think at one point we are going to look back at Jalen Wilson and go, how did this guy, as a Big 12 Player of the Year, get to the second round of the playoffs? And it's because I think he's, body-wise, he's kind of Mr. Average. You think you could find a lot of guys at that size and shape and athletic ability. He's a little older, which works against you in the draft. Guys, they'd rather go with an 18-year-old out of France that has a limit, that the sky's the limit, than a 23-year-old guy who we kind of know who he is. But I think all the things we knew who Jalen Wilson was, I think the thing that's exciting about him is he's turning out to be have a little more upside. He's everything we thought he was, which is really solid. And maybe people thought, well, he's going to be just solid, but that's good. You're looking to fill out your roster with good, solid guys. But I think, like you said, what we saw in the summer league and what Lucas was pointing out about his three-point shooting ability, that's a little more than solid. And I think character-wise, that's another thing we talk about. There's a reason guys interview people and get to know their families and their friends and know everything about them, because character does matter in this league. It matters. It might not be the be-all, end-all. You can go with a guy you're kind of iffy on his character if he just is an unbelievable talent. But those guys also can kill you, and if they don't play extremely well, they hurt your team. Jalen Wilson's a guy, he's got a high character. We talked about it with guys like Cam Johnson. The guys that are great in the locker room. Jalen Wilson he's malleable, right? I think he's got a certain personality that lends himself to, and I don't pretend to know him deeply, but just the time I've spent around him is I think he could probably mosey up and have something in common and find common ground and talk to a Noah Clowney as the same way he could to Dennis Schroeder. Right. I just feel he's one of those type of guys, and that's why I think he's to me, he's one of my favorite guys on this team.
Yeah. I mean, there's a reason he was able to walk down to Long Island for the first half of last year and be a leader and have a great, half season with them, and kind of not have the same basketball impact, obviously, in the NBA, but earn the same reputation, the one you just described. I mean, you're only talking about half a season with him, and he's, I think, left that impression on anybody who's covered or been around him, coaches, teammates, whatnot. And so that says a lot about who he is. He's done it on two different teams in just a year of being a pro.
Absolutely. All right. Well, Jalen Wilson, one of the guys we've got our eyes on, breaking it down. Hopefully you enjoyed that. More to come. Thanks to Lucas Kaplan. Thanks to the Capper. I'm Chris Carino, and this is the Voice of the Nets.